anger. We've all felt it, right? But according to the faith-based talks we're digging into today, if we don't really get a handle on it, it can do way more damage to us than to anyone else. So today, we're going to break down the anatomy of this really powerful emotion and explore a framework for taking back control. So, let's dive in.
First up, we'll start with a surprising story about a heart checkup that works as this incredible metaphor. Then we'll look at how anger can escalate, sometimes without us even realizing it. After that, we're going to explore the science and the baggage behind our emotional triggers. And finally, we'll unpack a toolkit for actually managing it all. So our journey starts in a pretty unexpected place. Not in the middle of some big argument, but in the quiet, sterile room of a doctor's office. It's a story from one of our sources that really sets the stage for everything we're about to explore. One of the speakers shares this absolutely jarring personal story. He goes in for his yearly cardiology appointment, does all the tests, gets a full workup, and he's given a clean bill of health. They tell him everything looks great, see you next year. But just 9 days later, his mitral valve ruptures, and he's rushed into emergency open heart surgery. And this right here is the whole point of that story. His physical heart looked perfectly fine on the outside, but there was this critical, hidden problem. And the sources argue the exact same thing can be true for our emotional heart. We have to check on it, because its condition, well, it really does determine the course of our lives. Which brings us to an emotional problem that can be just as dangerous: unchecked anger. So what does this progression of anger actually look like? Well, according to our sources, anger is hardly ever just a static, one-time thing. Instead, it's usually the first step in a really dangerous downward spiral, a cycle that just gets more and more intense if we don't stop it early. The sequence here is absolutely crucial. See, it all starts with just a little spark of anger, but if we let that spark just sit there and smolder, it ignites into rage. And if that rage is left to burn, it hardens into malice, where you genuinely want to cause harm. And finally, that malice finds an outlet in slander, using words as weapons to tear someone down. You see how each step isn't just something that happens, but a choice to hold on to that feeling just a little bit longer? So how does this whole spiral show up in real life? The sources describe two main ways this happens. First, you've got the spewers. You know these people. They vent their anger outwardly. It's loud, it's obvious, and there's a lot of collateral damage. But then you have the stewers. They let that anger just simmer inside. You might not see it, but it's in there, cooking and laying down these deep roots of bitterness. And if you want a perfect example of spewing, hey, look no further than our daily commute. I mean, think about road rage. One source mentioned a survey where almost half of drivers admitted to honking in anger. Over 40% used rude gestures, and more than a third yelled at another driver. That is anger, rage, and slander playing out in real time on our highways. And look, this isn't just about frustration and bad manners. This escalation can have the most serious consequences you can imagine. According to one source, in a recent 7-year period, road rage incidents actually led to 218 documented murders. That's not just anger. That's the full downward spiral, from a simple emotion all the way to a devastating final act. The stakes just couldn't be higher. Okay, so we've seen the what, that downward spiral from anger to malice. But what about the why? Why do we sometimes have such a massive, over-the-top reaction to something that seems pretty small? Well, to understand that, we need to look at the emotional baggage we all carry around in our own minds. Here's this really powerful metaphor our sources use. Imagine every single time you get hurt, you face a choice. You can either process that anger and deal with it, or you can pack it away in a suitcase. And every time you choose to just pack it away, that bag gets heavier and heavier. Over time, what started as just a fleeting feeling of anger turns into this permanent heavy baggage of bitterness that you are forced to carry with you everywhere you go. Now, there's some pretty fascinating brain science that actually explains this. One source breaks it down using a 3-part model. So first, info hits our basic reptilian brain. That's just our survival instinct. But then it travels to the paleomammalian brain. This is our emotional hub, our memory center. And this is where all that baggage is stored. It instantly scans a new event and asks, have I felt this way before? If it finds a match to an old hurt, bam, it triggers this massive emotional response, all before our logical, rational neo-mammalian brain even gets a chance to weigh in. Here is a story that just perfectly illustrates this. A groom is super late to his own wedding, and it causes his bride immense pain. Okay, now fast forward 15 years. He's 5 minutes late for a dinner date, and she explodes with rage. Why? I mean, her reaction isn't about the 5 minutes, right? The source calls this the Mr. Magoo brain, after the cartoon character who couldn't see clearly. Her emotional brain saw this blurry, vague resemblance to the original trauma and reacted with all the force of that wedding day. The baggage just got triggered.
And, this brings us to the most important question of all. If we're all walking around with this emotional baggage that can get triggered at any moment, what are we supposed to do about it? Is there a way to finally unpack those bags and put that weight down for good? Well, thankfully, our sources give us a really clear path forward.
Okay, so this final section is all about the solution. The sources offer a really practical toolkit, a clear 3-part framework for dealing with all this anger and bitterness so we can finally learn how to travel light.
The first principle here is urgency. The source explains that the original Greek word for foothold is topos, which literally means location. So the idea is when you let anger just linger overnight, you are giving negativity a physical location, like a piece of real estate in your heart for it to build on.
So what is the cure for all this bitterness? The sources lay out 3 steps. It starts with being kind. That's the choice to put someone else first, even when every single part of you feels totally justified in being selfish. Next, we're told to be tender-hearted, and this is all about empathy. It's that shift from wanting to put someone in their place to trying to put yourself in their shoes. And it all leads up to being forgiving, the ultimate act of letting it all go, which, as the saying goes, is like setting a prisoner free, only to realize that the prisoner was you.
And in the end, that's what this all comes down to, isn't it? A choice. Every single day, we choose. We choose whether we're going to pack away another hurt or if we're going to deal with it. We choose kindness over being right, empathy over anger, and forgiveness over bitterness. So the question the sources leave us with isn't what has happened to you, but what baggage are you choosing to carry today?